All right, pre-calculus, welcome to your quiz review video for quiz 3-1 to 3-3. That's going to happen on Friday, the 17th? Friday the 17th of October. Here we are, folks. Today we are brought to you by Bobo's PB&J. Grape, gluten-free, buys the temple. Laura Bar for the kids, chocolate chip cookie. Don't tell my daughters that I have one here. And then another gluten-free treat here. Nature's Bakery, gluten-free fig bar. Hashtag buys the temple. All right, so here we are. Let's take a look at these quiz review questions. I put down that this is an easy page, and I sent you the answers to this last week. There are a few boo-boos here that we have to correct. Some of you have mentioned that already. State the zeros and the multiplicity of each polynomial function. So what you do is you say that you set f of x equal to 0. So you say 0 equals to blank. It's already in factor form. So I say that x equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, which leads to this. And I say x plus 4 equals 0, which leads to this. And they all have multiplicity 1 because they're all raised to the first power. On your answer document, the first one, it accidentally says 3. I was thinking there's 3 solutions. No, they're all multiplicity 1. All right, moving on to number 2 here. Again, you say 0 is equal to blank. It's factored. So you set x minus 2 equal to 0. You say x equals 2, and it equals 2 twice. Equals 2 twice. And then I said x plus 3 equal to 0, and I get x equals negative 3. All right, so x equals 2, and it equals 2 twice. And x equals negative 3 once. All right, you don't have to say multiplicity 1. I just changed this because it was wrong. They're not all multiplicity 3. You only have to state the multiplicity if it's more than 1. All right, so it's on 3 that we actually have to factor. So we say 0 equals. We ask ourselves, what do these two have in common? Now, you don't necessarily need to factor out a negative. I just don't like this leading term here in the parentheses to be negative. So I factor out a negative because the leading coefficient, negative 2, was negative. So I divide both negative 2 and 4 by negative 2, and I factor out the x squared they have in common. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. 4 divided by negative 2 is a negative 2. I factor out the x squared they have in common, leaves me with x. Take out the x squared, gone. I have a minus 2. Again, if you just factored out 2x squared, that would leave you with a negative x plus 2. You can work with that. That's fine. You can set negative x plus 2 equal to 0. Negative x equals negative 2. X is 2. So x equals 2, you set this equal to 0. X equals 2 once. Then I set negative 2x squared equal to 0. I get x squared equals 0. I get x equals 0, but equals 0 twice. Equals 0 twice. Multiplicity 2. All right, so be careful there. I mean, it's technically plus or minus 0, but positive 0 and negative 0 are both 0. All right, 4 is back to being pretty easy. You set x minus 1 equal to 0. You get 0 twice. And you set x plus 2 equal to 0. You get x equals negative 2 once. You set x plus 1 equal to 0. You get x equals negative 1 one time. Easy page, folks. Easy money. Maybe get 2 or 3 of these. Please don't miss them. Obviously, 3 is the hardest. You got to factor out 3. I said x to the third equal to 0. I said x to the third equal to 0. I get x equals 0, and it's 3 times. I said x minus 4 equal to 0. I get x equals 4 once. I said x plus 2 equal to 0. I get x equals negative 2 once. All right. Easy page, easy page. You have 3 of those. I'm not going to tell you how many of you have on the quiz. You have 3 of those. All right, and 6 and 7 are also easy. And you have 2 of these. In fact, 1 through 7 represent the first page on your quiz. First page on your quiz. Find the remainder r when f of x is divided by g of x and is g a factor of r. All right, so it's a remainder theorem. So I write 8x to the third minus 3x squared plus a single x plus 4. Use synthetic division. This is for 8x to the third, negative 3x squared, 1 for 1x, and 4 for the constant. If I skipped a power, I would put in a 0, like I am on number 7. So I take x minus 1, what I'm dividing by, and I set it equal to 0. I'm asking, is x minus 1 a factor, or is x equals 1 a solution? This number 1 goes in the cubby. And how I do synthetic division is I bring down this first term, because I'm doing 8x to the third divided by a single x. 8 divided by 1 is 8. And I take the number in the cubby, and I multiply the number below, and then I add. Then I multiply, and I add. And I take 1 times 6, I multiply, and I add. So because I got a remainder, it's like 83 divided by 8 is 10, but remainder 3. means 8 doesn't go into 83. So because I got a remainder of 10, which is the first part of the question, find the remainder, x minus 1 is not a factor. X minus 1 is not a factor because I got a remainder of 10. That's a two-part question. Find the remainder. And if the remainder is not 0, you simply say x minus 1 is not a factor. Let's go. 1x to the fourth, negative 2x to the third, 0x squared, 15x, and a negative 2. 1x to the fourth divided by 1x. Bring 1 down. Negative 2 times 2 is a negative. Negative 2 times 1 is a negative 2. I add them up. I get negative 4. Negative 2 times negative 4 is 8. I add them up. Negative 2 times 8 is a negative 16. I add them up. Negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2. I add them up. I get 0. 0 is my remainder. It's like saying 48 divided by 8 is 6 remainder of 0. That's because 8 is a factor of 48. And that means x plus 2 is a factor of this polynomial because I have a remainder of 0. So I say 0 is my remainder. That's my answer. I underline it. I circle it, whatever you want to do. And I say because I have a remainder of 0, that x plus 2 is a factor of f of x. All right, let's go. Then we get into more interesting questions. All right, so of the 12 questions on your homework set, I'd say 5 of these, 1 through 7 here represented, are relatively easy. Now you got to find all zeros, all right, folks? And when you find all zeros, you're going to have to maybe use some synthetic division to guess. All right, because if I factor out the x squared they have in common here, I'm left with x minus 3. And I factor out the negative 2 that they have in common here, right? I'm left with 3x minus 4. And x minus 3 and 3x minus 4 are not the same. So I got to try. Remember, the theorem here is you take the factors of 8, which are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8. You divide them by the factors of 1 there, which is plus or minus 1. Okay, so you're going to have to guess. Now, because you got 8, you got 1, 2, 4, and 8. We're going to try plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 2 first. Plug in 1, you're going to do synthetic division. 1x to the third, negative 3x squared, negative 6x, 8. All right, use pencil. We're going to see. We're going to put 1 in the cubby, and it's kind of a guess. 1 times 1 is 1, add them up. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, add them up. 1 times negative 8 is negative 8, add them up. And I get 0. So that means 1e, x minus 1 is a factor. That means x equals 1 is a solution. It worked. I got a remainder of 0. Now, if it didn't work, if I plugged in negative 1 and got a remainder, I would just erase it and I would try again. Okay, I would try again. This is because I did x to the third and I divided by x minus 1. I divided by x. This drops the power. This is x squared minus 2x minus 8. Again, you did this in January or February of this year. And then I just do easy factoring. Multiplies the 8 and differs by 2. X minus 4x plus 2. Cover up method gives me x equals 4. X equals negative 2. And don't forget about that x equals 1 at the beginning. All right. Number 9 also won't factor by grouping. 4, 4, negative 7, 2. That ain't going to work. 1 or 2 of these might factor by grouping, okay? So, again, let's take a look here. So, you know, you got what goes into 2, plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 2. Now, technically, like 1/2 could be a factor here because the factors here are also plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. These are going to work out on your quiz. They're going to be nice. There's going to be no like 1/2 that is the first factor or 3. So again, if you plug in 1, positive 1, you can see why 1 doesn't work because it's going to be 4 plus 2 minus 7. Not going to work. If I plug in negative 1, I also won't get 0. If I plug in 2, it's going to be too big. So then I try negative 2. Again, you can just plug these numbers into f of x. You don't have to use synthetic division. If you plug 1 in for x and don't get 0, it's not a solution. So negative 2 is going to work, guys. You're going to have plenty of time to do guess and check. We'll talk more about this in class. Bring down the 4. Negative 2 times 4 is a negative 8. Add them up. Negative 2 times negative 4 is 8. I add them up. Negative 2 times 1 is a negative 2. I add them up. So that means x equals negative 2 is my first solution. Then I get 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. This does factor. Just guess and check. All right. Guys, you could use the quadratic formula. That's fine. Quadratic equation. It's no big deal. It might be hard to see how it factors, but it does factor. 2x minus 1, 2x minus 1. We should be pretty okay with factoring. I get x equals 1/2 twice. All right, so, you know, I would say it's number 10 and 11 and 12. This page right here where it gets a little more challenging. Okay, so you have plenty of them to practice here. You're gonna have 3 overall on your quiz. Okay, you're gonna have 3 overall on your quiz. We can do it. So yeah, no, 1's not going to work because if I plug in 1, that's going to cancel. I'm going to have 1 plus 9, which is 10 minus 4. That's not going to work. Goodness. Negative 1's not going to work because that's going to turn this into 20. 20 plus 20 is 40. Okay, so again, you can help yourself out by knowing right away, oh, 1's not going to work, negative 1's not going to work. So I'm going to try 2, 1, negative 4, 9, negative 20, 20. Bring down the 1. I do synthetic division. Okay. Oh, ding, ding, ding. I get 0. Yay. I start with x to the 4th. This is x to the 3rd minus 2x plus 5 minus 10 equals 0. All right. My gosh, do I have to do this again? Again, x equals 2 is the solution. All right. So this works by factoring, by grouping. Check this out. What do those two have in common? X squared. Leaving me with x minus 2. Always bring down the sign in the middle. Divide those two terms by 5. 5x divided by 5 is x. Negative 10 divided by 5 is a negative 2. Oh my gosh, I see the same thing twice. Yay. So I have x squared plus 5 in one parenthesis. I have x minus 2 in another parenthesis. That's why I say x equals 2 twice. X equals 2 there, and then initially there. Then I take x squared plus 5. I set it equal to 0. I get x squared equals a negative 5. That means x is plus or minus the square root of negative 5, which means x is plus or minus I root 5. All right. Again, not the easiest part. Never said it was, but it's doable. All right, so I look here again. If I'm looking at negative 1, or if I plug in 1 in for x, I get negative 17, and these aren't anywhere close to positive 17. So 1's a bad one to choose. Now, if I plug in negative 1, that stays at a negative 11 because you're square root of negative, so this would still be 1. Negative 11 minus that. This would be a negative 2. This would be a negative 1, so I have 4 straight negatives. And then plus 2, that ain't going to work. Negative 1's not going to work either. 1's very easy to check either in your head or with a calculator. So I'm going to try x equals 2 again. All right, x equals 2. And I'm doing that. I can use 2 because on a homework set question that I have to eliminate, I think it ends with 75. You can't use 2 because these are even numbers, and even numbers always have a factor of 2. Like on this next one, I won't use 2, all right, because what goes into negative 3? 1 and 3, all right? Then I'm dividing it also by 2, so 3/2 could be a choice. So like on 12, I wouldn't use 2. But what are factors of negative 6? Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. We already saw that 1 and negative 1 don't work. Anyway, do synthetic division, and then I find that I get a remainder of 0. 2 works. X equals 2 is a solution, which I just highlight over here. 2x to the 3rd plus 6x squared plus 1x plus 3. Look at these. I could try to plug in another number. That works. Or I could look, 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. It's going to be factoring. This is going to work by factoring, by grouping. Group those two together. I would say 11 and 12 are probably really this whole page. That represents the harder ones. And I see one where x is raised to the 4th power. So you're going to see this. Not 3 times, maybe just once. I factor out the 2x to the 2nd they both have in common, leaving me with x plus 3 plus, bring down the 1. Divide both terms by 1. X plus 3x plus 3. 2x squared plus 1 is the other factor. Set x plus 3 equal to 0. I get x equals negative 3. I got x is 2. All right, then I set 2x squared plus 1 equal to 0. Set 2x squared equal to negative 1. I get x squared is a negative 1/2. I take the square root. Get plus or minus the square root of negative 1 over 2. You can just call it plus or minus I root 2, which also simplifies to that. You'll see that later on the unit circle. Plus or minus root 2 over 2. All right, and the last one here of this kind. Then we're on the last page. 2x to the 4th plus 7x cubed plus x squared minus 7. Is that a minus 3? It's a minus 3. All right, so again, what goes into 3? Plus or minus 1 or plus or minus 3. So I'm going to start with 1, and thankfully 1 works out with synthetic division. I have a remainder of 0, so that means x equals 1. is a winner. Okay. So then I'm left with 2x to the third plus 9x squared plus 10x plus 3. That is not going to work. There's going to be no factoring by grouping here. You can factor out x squared, but then you're left with 2x plus 9. You can't factor out anything, so you're left with 10x plus 3. 2x plus 9 and 10x plus 3 aren't the same thing, so I gotta do synthetic division again. So I'm looking at 3. What goes into 3? Plus or minus 1. Plus or minus 3 is factors. So I'm gonna, if I try 1, guys, look at 1. Everything's positive, so 1 clearly doesn't work. So I'm going to try -1. All right, you might hear Elsie in the background not being quiet. So I bring down the 2. I do synthetic division. There's no editing out here at YakMath videos. -1 works. That's why x equals -1 is a solution. 2, 7, and 3 stand for 2x to the second plus 7x plus 3. This does factor. This would run one of the easy factoring by guess and check you would have done last year. There's only one way to get 2x to the second, 2x and x. There's only one way to get 3, 3 and 1. All right, there it is. This leads to x equals -1/2. This leads to x equals -3. Those are my 4 solutions. Again, not the easiest stuff. You know, we'll practice some more. But then 13 and 14 are easy. Use the intermediate value theorem to show that there's each polynomial function has a 0 in the given interval. And you have 2 of those. Just put them right there. And there? All right, you're not on the video. Just do it quietly. No one can see you. All right, Elsie's bringing down Stoke Coffee. That's another proud sponsor of YakMath videos. Go Wrexham. All right, so what you do is you just plug 0 in for x. You plug 1 in for x. This is your a, and this is your b. All right, so if I plug 0 in for x, I get a y value -1, so that's below the y-axis. The x-axis, I'm sorry, below the x-axis. And if I plug 1 in for x, I get a value of 1, which is above the x-axis. So an x value of 0 is below the x-axis. X value of 1, I'm above the x-axis. That means I cross the x-axis. That means I cross the point where y equals 0. That means there's a solution in between a 0 and 1. So you show me the 2 y values, and you say crosses 0. That's it. It's a very easy question. Intermediate value theorem. All right, f of 0, plug 0 in for x. I get, it's not always going to be -1 and 1. That happens a lot, though. Okay, it could be -6 and 2. It could be -3 and 2 or 4, something like that. All right. When I plug in 0, I get a y value of -1. When I plug in 1, I get a y value of 0. I crossed 0. I cross the x-axis. If I cross the x-axis, that's the definition of a solution, a root, an answer. All right, so you're going to have 2 of those. Those are easy money. All right, so if I'm looking at your quiz here, first 5 are going to be pretty easy, and then you're going to have 3 that, going to take some time. Then you have 2 that are relatively easy, so that's 7 questions. Oh, and then you're going to have 2 that are going to be like this. They're going to be a little bit more work, but 7 of your 12 questions overall are relative slam dunks. Okay, you can do it. Given certain info about f of x, find the remaining zeros and write the equation of f of x. So this is going to be worth an okay amount of points because first part, if I tell you that you have zeros of 6 and 4 plus I, the first answer is, well, x equals 4 minus I, the conjugate as well. So that's, 2 easy points. Let's get those right. Okay, so if x equals 4 plus I and x equals 4 minus I have to now put these in a factored form. So I move the 4 plus I over and I move the 4 minus I over. So I have x minus 4 minus I, and then I have x minus 4 plus I. Then I see x minus 4 twice, so I'm going to kind of group those together. So this is like saying a minus b and a plus b. Those are conjugates. So I do the first, x minus 4 times x minus 4 is x minus 4 squared, and I do the last. Negative I times I is a negative I squared. Okay? So I have x minus 4 squared minus I squared. I FOIL that out. That's x squared minus 8x plus 16. I squared is literally a -1, but if I subtract a -1, that means a +1. So then I have x squared minus 8x plus 17. If I were to set that equal to 0, use a quadratic equation, I would get answers of 4 plus or minus I. And then this x equals 6 means I have a factor of x minus 6, which I finally bring on down. I just distribute All right, 3 times 2 is 6 terms. One of you correctly told me that 17 times a negative 6 is not negative 112, but negative 102, so fix that. Anyway, then it's just some distribution. This puts together things you learned in Chapter 5, and then maybe later on in Chapter 5. But again, this is a January topic. I know you weren't given 4 plus I. You were given like 2I, 3I, negative 4I, that sort of thing. But we'll talk more about these, honestly, on Tuesday, but we can handle them. All right, so degree 4, so if x equals I, x equals negative I as well. And if x equals 1 plus I, then x equals 1 minus I also. All right, so this is what I told the kids last year. If x equals I and x equals negative I, then think of that as 1i and think of that as a negative 1i. You simply take x times x, which is x squared, and then you take 1 times negative 1, which is a negative 1. So if x squared equals negative 1, you can also say that x squared equals like I, on I is a negative 1, but I really don't recommend this. Okay, I recommend, and this is what you did last year. Like if you were told that x equals 2i and x equals negative 2i. Now you could have moved it over and you could have done foiling, that's fine. But if you don't have like, that real part is missing, you can simply say x squared equals 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4, and then just move that over. It's actually pretty easy to get the in factored form. If x squared equals negative 1, then I just move the negative 1 over. X squared plus 1 is a factor. That is very easy to get. Second one takes a little bit of time. So if x equals 1 plus I and x equals 1 minus I bring the 1 plus I over, I bring the 1 minus I over. I'm left with x minus 1 minus I. I'm left with x minus 1 plus I. I group the x minus 1s together. All right, and then I do the first and the last part of FOIL because I do have conjugates there. X minus 1 times x minus 1 is x minus 1 squared. Negative I times I is a negative I squared. X minus 1 squared is x squared minus 2x plus 1. To subtract I squared is a negative 1. To subtract a negative 1 is to add 1. That's going to give me 2. Then I distribute 2 terms by 3 terms is 6 terms. And that's going to ultimately lead to this answer. All right, folks. Pause this, go back. It's your quiz. You're going to have 12 questions on Friday. We can do it. This is Yak Math Video signing out.